only for having preserved part of this lost wisdom. During the Enlightenment, the Freemasons, who included the aristocracy, artists and philosophers, used Egyptian rituals and signs in their ceremonies. The $1 bill still retains the Masonic symbol of the eye and the pyramid. In 1798, Napoleon commanded a huge scientific and cultural assessment of Egypt and tried to claim its past for France. But with the start of Egyptology and the deciphering of the hieroglyphs in 1820, the ancient civilization of Egypt fell from grace.
The decipherment of hieroglyphs was like discovering a new planet and finding that the planet didn't behave like planets that you were used to. So suddenly we could read hieroglyphs. And what we expected to find was something like Greek philosophy, or we expected to find the secrets of the universe laid out in very plain language. It didn't happen like that. The preoccupations of the Egyptians are not the ones that we would like them to have. So there was a reaction, very strongly, particularly in the English-speaking world. The Egyptians were not intellectuals. They were not philosophers. A well-known novelist has described them as merely craftsmen, not artists. That idea dies rather hard, because even when we could read the hieroglyphs, we didn't understand the preoccupations behind them. We're beginning to, but it's taken a long time. So there was a strong reaction, particularly in England, that the Egyptians were mystic, but basically a bit thick. So it rapidly becomes the world of the chattering mummy, the strange unexplained phenomenon, the weird script, everything that leads to the Hollywood idea of the Egyptology mummy film.
Now that the influence of Egypt had been eclipsed, Western scholars started to reassess the other half of the ancient model, the Phoenicians. As Europeans obsessively sought to define that which was unique and superior about themselves, there was, during the latter part of the 19th century, a rising tide of anti-Semitism. Increasingly, Bernal argues, the Phoenicians were seen as the Jews of the ancient world. They too, therefore, could not have been a part of Europe's glorious ancestor, Greece.
Classics as the basis of a gentleman's education is centuries old. But there is something new that starts in the later 18th century and continues into the 19th, and that is a kind of worship of Greece. This starts back in about the middle of the 18th century, when the earth begins to move. You get the biggest shift in taste and attitudes since the Renaissance. The feeling is a reaction against all the fuss and frippery of the Baroque. The notion is back to simplicity, back to the fountainhead. And in terms of the classical world, that means a reaction against the Romans, who are now seen as imitators and tarsome elaborators, and back to the pure simplicity of Greece. And this kind of worship of Greece passes into the 19th century.
The Romantic movement, which soon dominated European thought, was infatuated with this new ascetic vision of Greece. It enshrined their beliefs in simplicity over sophistication and feeling over reason. The Romantics cherished the notion of childhood as free from the corruptions of later life. Now they saw Greece as the pure childhood of Europe.
The idea of Romanticism became very closely linked to the idea of geographical determinism. That is, that people are formed by the landscape and climate they live in, and they get their feelings and their emotional sense of community from there. And it's also very linked to the notion that cold is good for you. That the further north you come from, or the further up the mountain you come from, the more virtuous you are. Now Greece, ancient Greece, fitted this aspect of the Romantic model very well, but it was distressingly far south and with a distressingly equable climate. And therefore, I think from the end of the 18th century, you have the desire to associate Greece, which was now an admired culture, with the north rather than with the Mediterranean. So it sort of pushes people in that direction, to look for northern roots to explain the admired qualities of Greece.
By the 20th century, the modern nation-state could call on the Greek ideal to spur its troops into war. During World War I, the British adopted Athens, representing democracy, as their mascot ancient Greek city, while the Germans identified themselves with Sparta. They had picked the opposing sides of the Peloponnesian War, a war fought over 2,300 years earlier. In the 1930s, the Nazis claimed the ancient Greeks for themselves. Racially cleansed of impure Semitic or African ancestry, Greek civilization was harnessed to confirm the superiority and destiny of the Aryan race.
Allora, in questa sala è stato girato il film di Agatha Christie, Assassinio sul Nilo, un classico, che sulla nave credo che ci sia, che lo potete anche sentire o vedere.
En el vacío tenemos 12 columnas y los capiteles son de babiruforme abierto, ¿sí ve? ラムセス先生の時代はですね、すごく綺麗な時代があったわけなんですけれども、それ彼の考え方はですね、もしレリーフとか
In my readings, I came across Martin Bernal's name and Black Athena, and I found it very intriguing, very challenging, and controversial because he's challenging the myth or the old belief that the Greeks are the fathers of Western civilization, and tangible evidence saying no.